So if you're planning to move to Chesapeake, you might have looked on the map and you found a section of land called Deep Creek, and you're like, what is this? No one talks about it. Are there houses here? So what I want to do today is talk all about this kind of like a hidden and ignored section of Chesapeake called Deep Creek that might be a good spot for you, or it actually could be a completely wrong part of town, but you can eliminate it from your search depending on what kind of house and situation you're looking for. What we're going to do today is talk about all these spots, the neighborhoods, what's around here, all the things to do, or is it worth moving to this area? Because there are some pros to living in Deep Creek and the areas around Deep Creek, but there are definitely some drawbacks, and there are reasons why people do move, but also reasons why people don't really pick this area compared to maybe other parts of Chesapeake. So as we look on the map, I'm going to show you where Deep Creek is, but if you see first Hampton Roads, this whole section here, the south side of Hampton Roads is here. You see Chesapeake. Well, Chesapeake, and if you look on see where Chesapeake is, it's a big horseshoe, and I've mentioned this in a lot of videos. Well, a lot of talk, I talk about it. A lot of the real estate world talks about Greenbrier, talks about Grassfield and Hickory school districts and Great Bridge. This whole section down here, that is, some of the best schools, some in-demand neighborhoods, and it's close to a lot of things, but also closer to Virginia Beach. Then if you go over towards the west side, Western Branch is also a high-ranked school district, but further away from town, but it gets more talk. But then if you're looking on the map, you see this whole section here that often gets overlooked. You see Deep Creek South, you see Deep Creek North. Where'd it go? There it is, Deep Creek North, and also Deep Creek West. All this is a huge land section. So one of the main things first to mention is that in Chesapeake, you're going to feel like you're kind of in a country-ish environment. A lot of parts of Chesapeake feel that way, not just in Hickory and Grassfield or Western Branch, but you'll feel that kind of like that land, open space kind of vibe. Rural parts of town, but also neighborhoods all thrown in the midst of all of the land and the vacant parts of town. Deep Creek has a very similar feel to it from the standpoint of you've got a whole part of town that really doesn't have a ton of infrastructure built in it, considering Virginia Beach has a ton of suburbia, but strip malls and town center and the beach and things to do. And so does South Chesapeake, has a lot of shopping centers and parks and just more development. Well, Deep Creek has that country vibe or that rural part of vibe, and it also has a lot of suburban feel. But the difference here is that there is like an industrial feel that's planted right in the middle and sparsed around Deep Creek. And so what that does is it changes the complexion of what it feels like in Deep Creek compared to a place like South Chesapeake in Hickory or in Great Bridge or in Western Branch. We'll start first in the Deep Creek North and South areas first, and we'll go on the eastern and western sides from there. So number one, the first thing is as you're into the north part of Deep Creek, there are usually more older houses here. So if you could, let's do an aerial view. So you can kind of see the landscape of the area. So you see right here, got all these container sales and industrial services and rental, like equipment rental. Coming down here, you've got on Military Highway, the same kind of thing. Lots of businesses and older businesses, so it feels kind of older, right? So you're in that kind of part of town. So if you drop a pin, see this? This is Deep Creek. So this is part of Deep Creek here. But zooming out, if you go like 3 streets down, you're in the middle of a nice neighborhood. Fenway Avenue, very nice spot. I mean, you get houses in here in the 300s. And so if you want a cheaper house, you don't mind being near those industrial parts of town per se, this might be a good option because you can get more house for your money. A couple neighborhoods I want to highlight to show you what I'm talking about are Loxley Gardens in Brentwood. And so Loxley Gardens is again, just in the Deep Creek North section, but in the very corner of Deep Creek North. And if you notice that it's like a very basic neighborhood, like smaller houses, like 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, 2 bedroom, 1 bath, 3 bedroom, 1 bath. If you want a cheaper house, this is a good option. You're going to find houses in here still under $325, $300 sometimes. And you can get garages. You can get a little bit more space. Maybe if you have a garage, you want some extra space to store some stuff. Don't want to deal with an HOA. Loxley Gardens could be an option if you want to save some money. Now, on the flip side, if you go up towards Brentwood, but I like Brentwood because you had the same kind of like country feel, but a bit larger houses and a bit more unique houses. Like, so you can get a bit more space, like size wise here. And you see, you notice here, no sidewalks. It's kind of still, again, no HOA. So you're kind of doing your own thing here. But a little bit more like a larger size house and lot. And these are going to be in the 300s. So this kind of house over in, like, for example, Great Bridge would cost $425. Here, probably $340. So you're talking 15-20% difference in a lot of parts of Great Bridge compared to other parts of Chesapeake that have the other school districts that we've been talking about. Now, the other thing too is, as you're getting closer to the main road, I mentioned this before, you're going to be closer to, you know, like kind of this more busy parts of town, like north of George Washington Highway. This is closer to Brentwood. So again, kind of same kind of thing. A lot of car repair, a lot of body shops, a lot of paint places, that kind of stuff. And you notice a trend. A lot of Deep Creek houses, there are a lot of ranch style houses in Deep Creek. Kind of similar to parts of like Great Bridge. You hear those Great Bridge special concept. I've mentioned that before. A lot of ranch style in Deep Creek, houses built in the 60s, going into the 80s. That general time period is very common for houses built in Deep Creek. Now, another street mentioning here is Route 13, which is Military Highway. This is a very industrial road, but it's a very important road because it connects to a lot of other parts of town. For example, over towards 664 towards Western Branch, or towards the rest of Chesapeake, even eventually into Virginia Beach and Norfolk. Military Highway is a very, very, very long road and very helpful road. But if you drop a pin on there, you see it's kind of just this kind of industrial road, right? This is very, very, very Deep Creeky. You know, tire place, body shops, Dollar General, like just kind of this random mishmash of stuff. But even in the midst of all this industrial stuff, and I mentioned like the consistent ranches, there's still some variety in what type of house you're looking for, or you can get in Deep Creek. So now that's Deep Creek North. As you go further to Deep Creek South, you'll still see a similar idea where you've got, you know, the same like older mishmash and industrial parts of town, that kind of thing. But as you go further south, there are more newer houses and newer construction that has been built starting in the 80s and 90s, and even newer. For example, once you go down to the George Washington Highway, down closer to there's a little bridge right here. This bridge, the Deep Creek Bridge, this bridge, number one, is very annoying because it backs up a lot because it's a very key part of town for a lot of parts of the area. But as you get closer to here, there's a lot more newer construction that's happened. And as you go further south from there, you've got one of the, I'd say, for the price, the style of house, very rare types of neighborhoods called Culpeper Landing in the far south part of Deep Creek South. This area is very different than everything else that I've talked to you about with Deep Creek so far. You got an HOA, you've got like pretty new houses, and some that are like pretty much brand new. Several builders have built in here, and it's like a total like oasis separate from the rest of the parts of Chesapeake. And so you really don't even know that it exists unless you are driving here to live here. Culpeper Landing, these houses will be in the 5s a lot of times, and sometimes 6s, but you'd be paying like $50,000 to $100,000 more for the same type of house if it was in, for example, Great Bridge or Hickory. Now going further north from there, just north, there are neighborhoods like Mill Creek. Mill Creek was built in the 80s. Again, nothing fancy, but these are some great options for houses. These are in the 300s and sometimes just in the high 3s, low 4s. And again, these houses would be $75,000 or more higher in other parts of Chesapeake. So another great example of a newer neighborhood that is, you can get more house for your money, like 3,000 plus square feet, is Old Mill Run. So I'll drop a pin here. So right off of Great Bridge, George Washington Highway, further away, like I mentioned before, the further away you go, you can find some good spots. So this spot here, these houses, 5 bedrooms. This is where you can get, if you want larger houses, great options here. A lot of houses in the 28 and up, 3,000 and up square feet range, 4 or 5 plus bedrooms. Other neighborhoods like Elmwood Landing, Lindbergh Manor, Forest Cove, Miller's Run, Strawberry Acres, Old Mill Run. So a lot of neighborhoods that are kind of sparse through here. They're all kind of built in those 80s, 90s, and 2000s time period that I think, you know, if you're looking for this type of house, this newer kind of contemporary-ish style house, you can find some nooks in here for a cheaper price you could find otherwise. So that's a general overview of this Deep Creek South and Deep Creek North area. Now, if you go further into this really the actual where it says Deep Creek South on Google Maps. Deep Creek South is technically, a lot of this area on the map is actually Grassfield School District. So it's not Deep Creek School District. This area has a bit of a newer dynamic to it. There's some newer neighborhoods in here. For example, Marsh Creek, Locks Landing, and then of course Summer Park, which is a newer, almost brand new development like in the last, 10 years or so. This is a neighborhood that builders have come in here and built up a ton of land in here, mostly Stephen Alexander homes, but a few others. But see, a lot of this used to be just open farmland or just old neighborhoods. These are just all new or newer houses and this kind of this newer contemporary style. These are going to be in the 6s, 7s, and up mostly. But if you want a newish kind of house, this kind of style, it's very hard to find these. And so Summer Park's a good example for that. But a lot of this part of Deep Creek South has like that newer style. Another one's Creekwood, more like in the 80s and the 90s. But Grassfield School District in the 4s, upper 4s, and low 5s is nothing fancy, but what you get is the school district that you might want in some of the cheapest neighborhoods, cheapest prices that you can find in Grassfield. So that's one of the draws to a place like Creekwood. The Sawyer's Mill, same kind of thing, similar to kind of Creekwood, but a little bit larger houses in some spots, but very similar, similar kind of feel and similar kind of neighborhood. Another neighborhood that's worth considering if you want almost a brand new house or newer house is Brabble Shores. So these are recently built. Talking mostly in the 5s, into the 6s in Brabble Shores, but for what you're getting, again, another great option and a newer style of house. And just again, a tucked away neighborhood. If you want townhouses, Bryan's Cove's a good option because you can get townhouses in Bryan's Cove in like the mid upper 300,000 price range, and there's no street view for Bryan's Cove yet because it's that new. But you also get a private beach, which is pretty cool too. So now, if you notice, there's no Deep Creek East because there isn't. It just turns into Greenbrier and the rest of like Hickory Grassfield area. But then look over here, Deep Creek West. This whole section over here. What's going on over here? Okay, this area is more country than any of the rest of it, right? So you see all this green here. This is like farmland. There are very few neighborhoods over here. So majority of this area is considered Bowers Hill. So if you ask somebody and they say that they live in Bowers Hill, this is what they're talking about, right? Number one. But number two is sometimes people associate this area with Suffolk because it just feels different than the rest of Chesapeake. And it also feels like Suffolk because there's so much land over here. And if you look at Suffolk, the land size and location of Suffolk, this red line is the edge. Well, Deep Creek West, where it says there in Bowers Hill, is very, very close. You're a couple minutes away drive off Route 58. But it's also in the Western Branch School District, which is positive if you want that school district. Now, Bowers Hill, another thing about Bowers Hill is, and I'll drop a pin here, very rural, but these are old houses, septic and well water. So that's something different that you wouldn't necessarily expect in the rest of Chesapeake that you will find here, especially the further out away from the main road that you get. But more land, not necessarily huge houses, but it's a good option if you like that kind of rural part of town and you don't really want to pay a whole lot. These are going to be in the 3s, 4s, and 5s, depending on like the size of the land, size of the house, and the condition, whatever. But again, no one really even pays attention to Bowers Hill. There are very few times I even mentioned Bowers Hill. So majority of Deep Creek is going to be priced mostly in the 3s and 400s price range. You can find some houses under 300,000. It's very uncommon to find that anywhere in Hampton Roads. So I would check out there if you want to stay in and around 300,000. It's just not very easy to find. But most of Deep Creek's going to be 300s to 400,000 price range. But as you get into the newer houses and a little bit larger, you're going to be pushing into closer to 475, 500 and up, and 550 for the most part. Now, like for example, Culpeper Landing, you'll be in the 5s, sometimes into the 6s if you want a bigger house. And that's what the trend you'll find is that the older houses, 50s, 60s, 70s, even 80s, you'll find they're going to be in the 3s, sometimes 2s, 3s, and 4s. And as you get newer, usually the houses are a little bit larger. You're talking more like 4s, 5s, and 6s. Now, the pros to living here, number one, is it's cheap compared to the rest of Chesapeake. So 15-20% drop compared to Grassfield, Hickory, or parts of Grassfield, Hickory, and Great Bridge. Not unheard of at all. So you can get more house for your money in Deep Creek. So one of the things about Deep Creek, this area, is that it's in mostly Deep Creek school districts. So you'll notice that prices change based on where school districts are, and Deep Creek is kind of the dominant school district in this area, and that's one of the reasons why the prices are different. Number two pro is that if you don't like HOAs, there aren't too many here, separate from maybe Culpeper Landing, Bryan's Cove. There are several others, but not too many. Number three is if you're interested in hiking or wilderness kind of things, you're close to the Great Dismal Swamp, which that sounds awful. I understand. I'm used to saying it, so I don't even think about it myself. But it's a pretty big protected area. This is Lake Drummond, and you can drive through here. I've run up and down this. There's a road that parallels the Dismal Swamp, so you can hike through here. There's plenty of trails. But the big benefit here is it's cheaper, right? And so you can find some good nooks in here for the price. Now the cons, the drawbacks to living in Deep Creek. Number one is, again, you're kind of in this industrial zone, this industrial world. So as you drive out, it's hard to avoid the mishmash that you'll find like in Military Highway, George Washington Highway, Shell Road. Like this is kind of this old, this nothing really new going on part of town, right? That's a drawback. Now the question is, what is there to do? All right, so in Deep Creek, there's not a whole lot to do. You have to drive away into like the rest of Chesapeake and Greenbrier, into Virginia Beach, and into maybe even Western Branch to get more stuff to do. And that's one of the cons to living in Deep Creek. Another con or drawback to living in Deep Creek is it's also further from Virginia Beach and Norfolk. So you have to drive a little bit to get to 64 and also Interstate 64, and that takes you eventually to Norfolk and Virginia Beach into 264. But it can be a good 25-30 minutes to other parts of other cities that you might want to go to. That leads me to number three, which is the traffic in the central part of Deep Creek can be very annoying, especially in the near the Deep Creek Bridge I mentioned right here. This is super irritating. But the good thing here is that they are widening this bridge, and it's going to take some time. But once it's done, I think it's going to help traffic a ton, and it's an area that really, really needs it. This whole section right here. So that's a drawback now, but it might be less of a drawback into the future, even considering the fact that this road right here, the high-rise bridge, this is also a street or road that backs up a lot going into Chesapeake, the rest of Chesapeake, and into Western Branch into Suffolk. It's a big problem, but also is widening that as well. So a lot of traffic mitigation construction that is around Deep Creek, I think, is going to help this area a lot. There are some issues with flooding in parts of town, especially close to the creeks. So if you look at Deep Creek, it's called Deep Creek for a reason, and it's anything closer to here, I would consider flood insurance being a requirement. And there are several canals and creeks all through Deep Creek, and so the question to answer is, if you're concerned about paying for flood insurance, just look for where the waterways are, and the closer you are to those waterways, the higher the likelihood is that you'll be required to buy flood insurance if you buy a house in these areas. Now, away from there, actually very few parts require flood insurance. So it's kind of interesting that it's a very stark contrast in a very short distance. Now, I wouldn't say that just because you're not in an area that requires flood insurance, it doesn't mean that you might not want it. The drainage here might be a mixed bag depending on where you are. And another drawback is that some people don't like going to Deep Creek School District as much as, for example, Grassfield, Hickory, Great Bridge, or even Western Branch. And so most of Deep Creek is in Deep Creek, a high school district. But there are some nuances to that, like Deep Creek South, like where it says in the map, Deep Creek South, part of that is also in Grassfield School District, and also in the Deep Creek West, like Bowers Hill, Western Branch. So it's not all in Deep Creek, but most of it is, which can be a drawback if you want another school district. But this is one of the reasons why it's cheaper. Now, if you do want to be in this section of town, but you also want a house, for example, that has waterfront access, like you have a dock or a boat, for example, or you want something that just has a little bit kind of a more of an exclusive feel to it, just a little bit. Wingfield Point is that neighborhood. So this is like just kind of east of the rest of Deep Creek. You see this section right here, these few streets. So you see boat docks, for example, right here. Well, this neighborhood is it's not very big, but you've got water access. And so you got really nice nooks, like these houses that have water access. See that the nice water? These houses on the water are 7s and 8s, starting getting to the 8s right now. That's very hard to find if you want that waterfront access in Chesapeake in general. And so real nice houses, like 25 to 3,000 square feet to start, but as you get into the threes, you'll start seeing more 3,000 plus square foot houses. But off the water, so on the water, 7 and closer to in the 8s range. But off the water, it'd be more like in the 4s and 5s. So you're going to be in a nice neighborhood, kind of a unique one for the Deep Creek area. But you'll be paying a little bit more, but again, not as much as if you want the same type of house in other parts of town. So if you have any more questions about relocating to Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, or through Williamsburg, I love this area. I'm a real estate agent and I'm from this area. And so if you have any questions, you need to relocate to the area, need help, let me know. That's what I do. I love helping people relocate to the area. So if you have any questions, drop a comment, email, call, text, whatever, and I'll do whatever I can to help you relocate to the area. And I will see you on the next video.